All right, folks, we're going to switch gears. We've actually already started talking about, I just talked about the O.J. Simpson civil case that followed his criminal prosecution. And so that kind of introduces you to intentional torts. If you beat two people to death, that's a pretty intentional tort. And that was what the jury in the civil case against O.J. Simpson decided. So one of the things is that we look at the European Parliament. Keep in mind, folks, we have a very diverse participation in class in this section of the class, is that the rules around the world are quite different. The United States legal system, because of the First Amendment and freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and so forth, is a little bit more understanding than in some other countries. So you can have a defamation case overseas and have real damages. Much harder to prosecute those cases in the United States, especially people that are well known. Slander is spoken defamation. Libel is written defamation. And I actually have made a referral to an employment plaintiff attorney with a defamation case. I know somebody who, after he was let go from a company, the company said bad things about him, prevented him from getting another job. So he has a defamation action against his former employer. So again, I've just made that referral. I don't know how that'll come out. So there's two ways that we can get libel. This is a very good slide, folks. This is a slide you may want to keep track of. So we have intentional torts like the O.J. Simpson case. You also have negligence. This is usually the car accident or something bad happens. You have a pool in your backyard and the next door neighbor's kid falls in and drowns. And people say, well, you were negligent because you didn't keep your fence secured around your pool, and that was allowed a minor, a little kid, to wander in and drown. By the way, I watched the news this morning, and they actually had a segment where they're reminding people that over holiday weekends like the one we have coming, one of the things is people spend a lot of time in the water, and they said, good rule of thumb, one adult for every one child, because it's so sad that children, even children that swim well, can get into trouble, and it's really important to have the adults there and keep an eye on the little people. The other situation we run into is something called strict liability. Strict liability can include, it oftentimes involves manufacturing. So when you see these cases where Johnson & Johnson made baby powder, and I've never heard of this application, but apparently the allegation is a number of women over the years used Johnson baby powder in their intimate regions, and that this caused them to have different types of cancers. And so the allegation is, since you made the product and you knew that the product could contain trace amounts of asbestos, that the asbestos or whatever was in the talcum powder could have caused these feminine cancers, that you're strictly liable for the outcome. So that's kind of a strict liability argument. Another one that's in the news is Monsanto Chemicals, which is now owned by Bayer, B-A-Y-E-R, out of Germany. And they're saying that the weed killer Roundup was able to cause people some serious cancers because people were exposed to it, and that the manufacturer knew or should have known about the injury caused by that. So that, again, is under strict liability. Folks, again, we want you to focus on terminology as we go through these chapters. Compensatory damages, this is what you spent. You're in a car accident. It's the other guy's fault. You lost money from work. You lost wages. You paid for doctors. You maybe had to replace your car. Those are compensatory damages. In contrast, punitive damages, and it sounds like our word punishment, are intended on top of the compensatory to say, you know what, you guys are really stupid. You shouldn't do this again. So we're going to add some punitive damages on top of the compensatory damages. Many states have a cap on medical malpractice. The reason for that is a lot of juries get very upset with doctors. They say, oh, these doctors are really rich and they've got lots of insurance. The problem with this is that we're suing ourselves because the doctors just pay more money for medical malpractice insurance and charge more money for their medical services because they're paying so much money for insurance. So many states, including the state of Texas, have medical malpractice reform. And in order to file a medical malpractice case here in Texas, the person has to go to a medical board locally, get approval before they can actually file the med mal case in the courthouse. And then there are limits on damages. So who's liable? We actually addressed this in the talking about criminal liability in the previous chapter. There's a little bit more liability in the tort cases, but still, if a little kid does something and the parents were very unlikely to have been responsible, as long as it's not serving a particular purpose, then the parents are probably not going to be responsible either. Again, this is going to vary between different juries and between different jurisdictions. And we talked about the intentional torts. Again, the O.J. Simpson case, a good example. Folks, as I mentioned to you, this is a very important set of summary slides. There's 4 of these slides, so this talks about different things and keep in mind, assault and battery are separate. Assault is the fear of being hurt. Battery is the actual touching. Now, one of the things that's important about battery is that it does not require injury. A lot of people think about, if I find Alfonso and we're out at the bar drinking and we get in a fist fight, that's assault and battery. Actually, one of the examples I use if I'm teaching in a live classroom is I'll hold my hand over a student who's sitting down. I'm walking around the classroom, and I say, if this student was afraid just by my hand being over his head, that would be assault. No touching involved. Battery does not require for me to haul off and punch the student, only that I touch the student without the student's permission. So that's battery. Now, the thing is, nobody's going to pay attention if there's no injury. Now, if the student has big bruises on their arm because I grabbed their arm forcefully and crunched their arm, maybe they've got a little bit of a case there. And keep in mind, again, assault and battery is both a civil case and a criminal case, as is some of these other claims. Now, in Texas, mental distress is not a separate claim. So you have to have a physical injury, and then you can add on the mental distress. But it's not easy to recover on that here in Texas. We then look at trespass and nuisance. And then we look at disparagement, interference with a contract, and prospective advantage. By the way, one of the biggest cases of interference with a contract and prospective advantage was, again, right here in Houston, Texas. And in fact, the lounge in Welder Hall, where the business school is hosted, is named after some Jamales. Joe Jamale, part of that family, was called the King of Torts. And back in the 1990s, there was a huge case called Pennzoil v. Texaco. Pennzoil made a deal to buy Getty, G-E-T-T-Y, Getty Oil Company. And when Texaco found out about the deal, they just ran in and paid more money and took the Getty deal away. So Pennzoil was very upset, and kind of out of the ordinary, instead of hiring a big corporate firm, they hired Joe Jamale, and they said, you go in there, you bulldog, you go out there and go after those mean Texaco people for taking that deal away from us. And so it was a huge case, an $850 million judgment against Texaco for stealing the Getty deal from Pennzoil. So very interesting case right here in Houston, Texas. Slander, libel, invasion of privacy. Fraud, and you think about fraud, think about the Bernie Madoff case, which is a criminal case, but also a civil case. So, and then the next set of slides just talks about some of these issues in a little bit more detail. This is a very interesting case. You might want to, you can Google this case and get some more information on it. It's a pretty interesting case. When we talk about trespass, property rights, that's a big deal in Texas. If you're out wandering around in the country and there's a fence up and it says, do not enter, trespassers will be shot, don't go because you might be shot. So sometimes people use guns in Texas to protect their property. Other states may not be as understanding about that. By the way, conversion is the polite word for stealing. So in criminal court, we say someone is convicted of theft. In a civil case, we say if you took somebody else's property, you converted it for your use, or conversion.